Hi, Wendy here again with Canva Practice number 9. I'm going to do it on family history. Of course, many much more well trained and articulate and capable people have made recordings about such a thing. But I'm doing this because I'm learning. I'm learning several things at one time. Family history has always been interesting to me. I remember asking my parents to tell me about the olden days. Little did I know that they did not live in the olden days, whenever those were. I remember in first grade, I was living in Nancy, France. Perhaps that was kindergarten. But anyway, I was in Nancy, France, and I couldn't get to sleep. And I was trying to get myself to relax by remembering everything I could possibly remember about my life, just in case someone needed to know. I started keeping a diary when I was 16. I waited until exactly I was 16 because I thought you had to actually start on a specific date, such as your birthday or the New Year. That was silly. I don't know where I got that idea from. I'm sure in high school or elementary school I had projects involved in family tree. However, I don't remember any. When I started college, I somehow got interested in the family tree and started being known as the family historian. When I look back on that, though, I really didn't do as much as I could have. However, I did start tracing the family tree, trying to. When I got to college at BYU, I did a lot of study research in their library where I was able to get a lot of microfiche. And what I was able to do with weeks of research, you can now do in 2 hours with Ancestry.com. In fact, a mistake that I had made back in college and had identified it as just a theory ended up on Ancestry.com. I could tell because it has my spelling area typed out as a actual word. I said Olaf County, and it was not Olaf, it was Clay. That was an error. At any rate, I've also used the power of life stories, in college when I became a counselor. Well, I didn't become a counselor yet, but in preparation for it, of course, we had to write our life stories. When I returned to that same school as an adjunct professor, I also employed the use of life stories. It was very meaningful. In therapy itself, especially with substance abusing clients, we did life stories. I did it in other capacities, other jobs. Before my mom died, I thought I was going to write her life story and organize her pictures. Somehow I didn't do it, even though I started purchasing the products to make it more efficient. I never used them to their full extent. Now I'm the old one. I would like to remember my life if I get dementia or something like that. And I think if I have some organized pictures and stories, it might help that. But I don't know where all my pictures are. I've moved so often and gone through various difficulties, shall we say, that some of the pictures are gone too. I still have memories. There's no one to share them with. And possibly no one in the family really cares. But some of them are really funny. And if I do lose my memory, I'd like to revisit them again. When I was about 16, I started to journal because I wanted to remember how things were when I was a mother. Well, the situation hasn't changed that much. I never did become a mother. I forgot to have kids. But I want to be able to look back on my life and remember times that sustained me, times that were difficult, that I withstood the difficulty and came out on top. If I lose my memory, I at least want to hear the story about some funny things that happened in my own life, even if I don't recognize it's my own life. I hear that when you have dementia or Alzheimer's, excuse me, you tend to remember your childhood more profoundly. No, I do not have a diagnosis. It's just that I cannot help but think about things like that, especially after you have a stroke. So today's Canva lesson, after all that long speech, is about using Canva with some memories that I have. I tried drawing the memories a few years ago as part of my recovery from my stroke, and they're very childlike. One, because I remember them from my child mind before I had any skills, and two, because I lost any skills I did have when I had my stroke. My dexterity is just not the same. So, I guess a subtitle would be using art for recovery from stroke, something of that nature. I'm already starting to ramble, so I'll stop and organize some of the pictures for this so called lesson practice. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong in recording this with the picture behind it. Perhaps there you need to make sure that you're pressing save and exit. And one of the opportunities you have to do that is through Exit Studio, but the colored tab is to save without exiting. So it's better to use to the right where it says save and exit. Anyway, in this story, which begins, my life story begins before I was born, my mother and father were newlyweds, and my father had a friend over to play cards. I believe it was Charlie McGonigal. My mother was making donuts for the first time in her life, and every time she brought it to my dad to see if it was ready to be eaten, he'd quickly try to get rid of her because they were busy playing cards. I guess that would be akin to today's gaming or watching football or something. So she kept going back to cook the donuts some more. I guess fry them maybe. The last time she brings out these donuts, my father breaks his tooth on it. My father never had any dental problems, never had cavities, anything of that nature. It's apparently in his family tree that they have very strong teeth. But can you imagine living that down the rest of your life? Oh, I broke my tooth. The only time I had to go to the dentist was because I ate my wife's cooking or her baking or frying, whatever it was. At any rate, it probably wouldn't have happened if he had not kept bringing her back to the kitchen or if she hadn't constantly sought approval for donuts instead of checking her own taste. Kind of a funny story, but I guess you got to hear my mother say it to really catch the depth of the humor of the story. Here I am recording this segment again, probably for the third time, and not just because I misspeak and I have a funny sounding voice, but because I am not properly saving and exiting. So I don't know if it's me, if it's my computer that keeps buffering, or what the problem is. Anyway, my first memory is of Cobblestone Street. Before I say that, though, my mother and father came over to the United Kingdom on the Queen Elizabeth II, I think it was, and they played Scrabble on the boat. Apparently, that's not all they did because I was born in England. At any rate, when my mother was in the hospital with me 3 months premature in Cambridge, England, my father, taking care of my two older sisters, apparently ran out of diapers, and so he borrowed Vickie's underwear or panties for Jamie to wear. And apparently Vicky said, "You pee in my panties, I break your neck." I'll have to draw something about that because I guess it would be funny if you heard it. Or again, if you hear my mother tell these stories, they're hilarious. My first memory is of something similar to this. I don't even know where this particular picture is taken, but when I was again on a cobblestone street in England numerous number of decades later, I was brought back to my first memory. That first memory is being on a street with my family. I only remember my sisters, not my parents. And in front of us was a man and a woman on horses. And my sister Vicky told me, "That's Roy Rogers and Dale Evans." I totally believed her. I was disappointed when I realized it probably wasn't true. But it's amazing how much you still remember when you're very young. I believe that I left England when I was 3 years old, so that's pretty young. And how seemingly insignificant. I wonder why I would remember that. Since I'm posting this to the public, of course I'm not going to include all the important pictures and all the stories and drawings and so forth. Just an example of what you can do when you don't have photos to indicate stories that you remember from your childhood or your parents or grandparents, etc. I don't know why in this picture I am not wearing my matching dress with my sister's. I suspect something might have happened to the dress. At any rate, we still did have that dress decades later. It passed down to generations, I think. I loved wearing my British dresses and British clothes. This was from a passport photo, not ticket, passport photo when we're going from England to the United States. It's on the internet under ancestry.com, so you never know where you can find things if you don't have the picture anymore. I didn't get this picture from there. I meant in general that there are pictures in various places on the internet that you would never expect. When I was about 3 or 4, I lived in Biloxi, Mississippi, I believe. One day I cleaned my room and was very proud of myself. I walked down the hallway beaming. I was getting ready to tell my dad about my great feat. Before I could say anything, he said, "Wipe that smile off your face." So I ran back to my room crying, and I've never cleaned my room again since then. My older sister Jamie and I used to sneak together in the middle of the night to play dolls. Most of the time it was Barbies, but when I was in pre-K days, it would have been fat dolls, as we used to call them. Anyway, one night when we were sneakily playing dolls, a black figure, probably a ghost because it had no shape, appeared in the doorway. We were so scared we covered our eyes with the sheets. Next morning, one of my sister's, Vickie's dolls, was missing. Dun dun dun! It also set the stage for us playing dolls in bed when we were supposed to be sleeping for many years to come. When I was in kindergarten, I lived in Nancy, France because my father was in the military. We originally lived at, I believe it was 6 Rue Isabelle, and our apartment was in front of railroad tracks, and behind the railroad track was a Catholic school. Perhaps it was more than a school. At any rate, I used to watch the school children play. And I could hear the nuns sing Dominica, Nika, Nika, Nika. So I thought they were the ones that recorded it, of course. Already in 1963, I guess it was, maybe 65, huh? My sisters, especially Vicky, was notorious. She used to like to drop balloons filled with water off of the balcony and onto the pedestrians below. She also was very good at learning French, and she taught me many words like ouvre la porte means open the door. Excuse me, I don't speak very clearly. We also had very interesting things to see downtown and across the street. I'll talk about that some more later on. I don't know how long we lived there, but there were some characters that lived there, such as Madame Apiece, and I have not found the picture I drew of her a long time ago. The originals are missing, and I only made a few copies. Of course, it's very childlike looking the way I drew. It's not just because my memory is frozen in my mind at the age I was, but because I never had any artistic skills before my stroke. And if I had any at all, I would have lost them. But I'm going to keep them very childlike instead of, improving my use of perspective and other art skills. How disappointing that I didn't properly save my recording for this particular screen. Anyway, behind the house at Tool Rosebeer Air Force Base housing area, when I was in first and second grade, were some magical woods. We had to go through a ditch first, and over to the right there were some itchberries, which my sister Vicky calls, as you can imagine. We had one of our forts built there. We sisters used to build forts. In that same area, right there near the itchberries, was a moss bed with a dead bird in it. I buried the bird, I think I did. There were also fossils with spiders underneath, and the spider webs were more like nests made out of fluffy cotton or something. There were also gypsies in the woods, which I never saw them. I never saw them. My sisters did, and apparently they sometimes came into the housing area. There were wild boars and cliffs and glass snakes and a little like island of trees where the Kingsbury brothers had their forts. There were marabelle fruits growing on trees or bushes that were guarded by the man on the horse, the man in red on the horse, I think it was. He was a farmer who had a rifle. I vaguely remember him. He never shot anyone, but of course we were afraid that he would. But we ate his marabelles anyway because, after all, we were Americans. We were entitled to it. Gee. There was a crabapple tree, which I talked about later on with the memory with my dad. And there was just so much to do up there. Up and to the right was an area where there was actually open sewage, and we played in that. Yes, there was toilet paper you could find. Can you believe it? Gross. But there were so many mirrors. There was fresh raspberries and red berry, some kind of red berry that you could pick and eat right there while you're outside still. It was very fascinating and so many things to do and so many friends to play with, but mostly I played in the woods with my sisters. We were still living in France, Jules Rosier Air Force Base, and I was about first or second grade. I found a soda that somebody left behind in the kitchen, so I drank it. Noticed it had pits in it and started spitting them out. I was actually outside of that rainbow colored curtain that keeps flies out. The soda had ants in it. Ew, gross. The woods behind our house into Rosier's Air Force Base, France, were magical to me, even when my older sisters didn't want to play with me. I found a crabapple tree. Later that evening, I told my father about it. So he was very interested and invited me to bring him to it. He was surprised that I could find it. And indeed, they were crab apples. It was a very special bonding moment for the two of us, I'm sure. And my hair looks pretty bad, and it still does. Isn't that amazing? was still living in France when I started remembering my Christmases. I might have been in second grade when this happened. My sisters and I all got transistor radios for Christmas. It was so exciting. I also got a pair of tan leotards. Unfortunately, I also got diarrhea in them. In Sembach, we again lived in an upper apartment with a balcony on the outside. I'd like to say that all my balcony memories are good or funny. However, they're not, especially when my sisters were babysitting me alone. Remember back in those days, they had different rules about how old you had to be left alone with a child. At any rate, I was in third grade, and my sister Vicky instigated this. She and Jamie locked me out on the balcony with just my underwear on. I couldn't call out because I didn't want to bring my uh, situation to the attention of anyone so they wouldn't see me with my underwear on. As far as I was concerned, both of my sisters were excellent cooks, especially when my parents weren't home. Here, Vicky is making her famous yum yum. It was simply a quarter of a piece of bread that was stuck into melted butter. She also made great icing and homemade Reese's cups that she would put in the freezer. Jamie was also very talented in my childhood mind and probably pretty good anyway. She made Toll House cookies. She was also famous for her grilled cheese sandwiches, which were open faced, and she made scrambled eggs with saltines crumbled up in them, which I later found out was an ancestral recipe, close to it anyway. So sometimes when mom and dad weren't home, it was a bad time for me, and sometimes it was very good. When I was in fourth grade, my family lived in Dayton, Ohio, in a Huber Heights housing area, while my dad was assigned to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. I enjoyed it there, even though it snowed and it snowed very high. I used to like to hang out in the kitchen with my mom, where I still was considered the runt of the family terminology they used, but it also awarded me special privileges such as getting to lick the bowl or the mixer when my mom made cakes and other desserts. One of my best memories of my father, we also have a photo of, but in this drawing of the same situation, my father played jump rope with my sisters and I. While my father was stationed at Scott Air Force Base, we lived in Lebanon, Illinois. We lived here during his assignment and during his remote tour to Thailand. It's a strip map of how a child would perceive the town. We had lots of friends there, my sisters and I. Very cool house, woods in the backyard again, always someone to play with. Both military families, retired families, and civilians. It was a good time. From here, we moved to Florida because my dad didn't come back, but I'm not going to talk about that. Here, you get the basic idea of how you could use something like Canva to record, upload pictures, upload photos, interview the family member. You could play these kind of things at family reunions if you have them. You can play them at at celebrations of life. You can help somebody with their memory when it starts failing. By the way, all these ums and for using the wrong words, I am not having a problem. I'm just not used to talking to a screen that doesn't interact with me. Um, so that's it in a nutshell. I'm still learning a lot about Canva. I do have the habit of not saving and exiting properly for some reason. It's a pretty easy program, and the mistakes are mine totally. So that's it for Canva Practice 7 9.